Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
All of my research and that I conducted was my 60-plus graduate students, was motivated by their need to learn, so that we can teach. Of course, in some inventions happened along the way, but I've always considered the end the result. And I always consider that this invention to be byproducts of the learning process. The end product for me was always better understanding, or when one really succeeded in unifying theory that can help us in teaching the subject. I've also looked at teaching as a vehicle to try new ideas, of new ways to doing things on an intelligent group of learners. That is as the vehicle for the teaching research results. And in my experience, this kind of teaching is the most stimulated and motivating to students. I am also uncovered many interesting research problems as the cause of teaching assumption. It is this unity of research and teaching, their close connection and the benefits gathered by exercising and the interplay that to me recognized the successful professor.
The powerful influence of Stevenson's text on the discourse of dissociation is strikingly apparent in the work of American physician and psychologist Morton Prince. Reber credits Prince with pioneering the phenomenon of popularizing MPD as embodied in a spectacular case. Prince's Dissociation of a Personality, 1905, tells the story of Miss Christine Beecham, a pseudonym for Clara Norton Fowler, who, according to Prince, is a person in whom several personalities have become developed.
Why does burning a food item provide information about its value as a food? The nutritional value of food can be measured on many different scales. The most basic measurement scale is the free energy content of the food. In other words, how much energy is released when chemical bonds within the food are broken. The energy content of food is measured in calories, the amount of kinetic energy required to raise the temperature of 1 ml of water, 1 degree. Food is burned under controlled conditions, breaking chemical bonds and releasing free energy. The burning is chemically similar to the breakdown of food in cellular respiration, although the process occurs much more quickly and in a less controlled fashion during ignition. Calorimeter can measure the energy in food, but cannot measure the digested energy of what we have.
This is a kind of object that you're probably all familiar with when you had the term robot, but I'm going to show you the very first robots. They were characters in a play in the 1920s called Rossum's Universal Robots, and the play was written by Czech writer called Karl Čapek. And basically, these robots, people tend to think of robots as kind of cute cuddly toys or, Hollywood depictions kind of devoid of politics. But the first robots were actually created and imagined in a time of absolute political turmoil. You just had the First World War, it finished, had a devastating impact across Europe, and so people are kind of reflecting on what does it mean to be human, what makes us human, those kinds of question. And this kind of context is what inspired Čapek to kind of write this play. And interestingly, these robots being human, they are actually in the play assembled on a production line. A bit like the Ford manufacturing production line. So even though they are human, they are assembled, and these robots are designed to labor, and that is their primary purpose in society.
Welcome to today's lesson. We're continuing with our study of taxonomy. Taxonomy is how scientists classify organisms into different groups based on the characteristics that they share. So, for instance, a good way to think about taxonomy is the U.S. Postal Service. If we want to send a letter to someone, we first start off by addressing it to the nation they are in. By default, we usually assume that's America, but it doesn't have to be. Treat England or Costa Rica or Spain. You put their nation or their kingdom. Then within that kingdom, you address it to a slightly more specific level, their states. So, for instance, South Carolina would be the same as a phylum. And within that state, you would address it to their city and then to their street number, the street they live on. Then you would address it to say their apartment complex, and within that complex, you'd address it by their last name to their family, and then finally their first name to the specific person you want to get it to, and in that way we're able to weed out all the 400 million people we don't want to send our letter to in America and pinpoint the exact person we want the letter to reach. And in the same way, scientists use a taxonomy chart to pinpoint a living creature and organism and how it relates to everything else in the world.
Now the economists calculated, it's a back-of-the-envelope calculation, that removing all immigration controls would double the size of the world economy, and even a small relaxation of immigration controls would lead to disproportionately big gains. Now for an ethical point of view, it's hard to argue against a policy that will do so much to help people that are much poorer than ourselves. The famous RAND study reckons that a typical immigrant who arrives in US ends up with $20,000 a year. That's rough. It's not just the migrants themselves who gain, it's the countries they come from. Already, the migrants working for poor countries working in rich countries send home around $200 billion a year, through formal channels, and about twice as that through informal channels. And that compares to the need $100 million that Western governments give in aid. These remittances are not wasted on weapons or siphoned off into Swiss bank accounts, they go straight into the pockets of local people. They pay for food, clean water, and medicines, they help kids in school, they help start up new business.
So, when we talk about the polar regions, just to clarify exactly what we mean. And we have first of all the Arctic at the top of the Earth and the Antarctic at the bottom, and so the Arctic was named after the Greek word for bear. Now surprisingly it's not after the polar bears that live in the Antarctic or live in the Arctic, and based on it's after the Little and Great Bear constellations that can be seen in the sky. Now the Greek also hypothesized that there would be the Antarctic, which is how we get the name Antarctica, and of course it wasn't discovered until much later on. Now these regions are opposite in many ways other than just their names and their location on the globe, and so if we look at the Arctic first of all, and the Arctic is actually ocean surrounded by land, and so you can see here this is the UK down here in this kind of Russia, and then American Canada around here, and so there is a bit of land cover and a rice on the top in the Arctic, which is Greenland here, and may see all this area here. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize that this isn't actually land. The North Pole isn't on land. It's just one big ocean.
Turner, not surprisingly, painted one of the earliest pictures of London's fog, in the 1835 painting The Thames Above Waterloo Bridge. Turner is a true-born Londoner, is advertising his familiarity with London's air problem by putting smoke, an atmospheric pollution, at its center. And as you can see, in here, the bridge is the central elements, which is a theme that's later taken up by Monet. And it's partly obscured by the steam and smoke which rises from both sides of the river. Here, we see a shot tower. I think you can just about to see, which was constructed in 1826. Do you know what shot towers are? They produce shot for guns, ammunition. And they were very smoky, one of the more smoking industries. But it's barely visible, as you can see, as are the various industries on the Lambeth side of the river. On this side, there's a steamship about to dock or preparing to leave. It's black smoke thrusting up to join the kind of swirling arc of smoke there. William Rodner sees this painting as a potent essay on the energy and complexity of modern polluted organism. Smoke, I think, here represents for a flourishing economy, which brings employment and food on tables, but also the dirt and pollution associated with the fumes all seems to be tainted by sulfurous yellow.
They call it the marshmallow test. A 4 to 6-year-old child sits alone in a room at a table facing a marshmallow on a plate. The child is told, if you don't eat this treat for 15 minutes you can have both it and a second one. Kids on average wait for 5 or 6 minutes before eating the marshmallow. The longer a child can resist the treat has been correlated with higher general competency later in life. Now a study shows that ability to resist temptation isn't strictly innate, it also highly influenced by environment. Researchers gave 5-year-old used crayons and one sticker to decorate a sheet of paper. One group was promised a new set of art supplies for the project but then never received it. But the other group did receive new crayons and better stickers. Then both groups were given the marshmallow test. The children who had been lied to waited for a mean time of 3 minutes before eating the marshmallow. The group that got their promised materials resisted an average of 12 minutes. Thus, the researchers note that experience factors into a child's ability to delay gratification. When previous promises have been hollow, why believe the next one?
Why should we bother studying animal behavior? Well, first and foremost, because we are interested in understanding why animals do what they do. There are lots of other reasons for studying animal behavior. Conservation biologists need to know what animals do if they're going to save them. Are those animals social or solitary? How much space do they need and how many mates do they have? Sometimes you can't predict the outcome of the research. Fernando Nottebohm started out being interested in how birds know what to sing. Yet his research eventually led to a complete overhaul of the entire field of neurobiology, a totally unanticipated yet utterly monumental effect. And this is the course textbook by John Alcock. The fact that this is in its 9th edition tells you how fast and afield animal behavior is. There are lots of new developments.
Audio Jungle.